on. Let me, I guess, ask you the first question this way. With the president, as Kelly says, busy with NATO and his actions as commander-in-chief, leader of the free world, however you want to phrase that. How has any of that been diminished or affected by all the politics that's surrounding whether or not he stays in the race for president, do you think?
Well, Connell, it's really great to be with you to talk about this issue right now, because the NATO leaders across the board are grateful that Joe Biden has been president for the last 3.5 years. What we're watching is to revitalize NATO. We're seeing it here in Washington with all 37 member countries represented. It's a NATO that a few years ago was in disarray, unsure of whether or not it had any purpose, and very much reeling from the Donald Trump years where President Trump attacked NATO time and again. And so President Biden, he's found a way to work with these leaders to get defense commitments up. You'll hear that discussed a lot. The level is 2% of GDP being spent by each country. That's the commitment. And that's now at 23. It was 6 when President Biden started, so it's up 4 times. But he also has their respect. You know, he's been leading the fight to support Ukraine across all these countries, traveling time and again. So I don't think there's any loss in esteem for Joe Biden in NATO. If anything, there's admiration. That's why we see the robust kinds of meetings and events that we're seeing right now.
That admiration, that respect, as you say yourself, is for, the past actions of the president. I think the question is about whether the confidence is there in the future. Ian Bremer, who I'm sure you know is a well-respected foreign policy analyst, said the following earlier this week. I thought it was interesting, talking about world leaders and what they've been telling him. He says they, meaning these leaders, don't think that he, meaning the president, can serve another 4 years. I will say that's true with every leader I've met with that's attending the NATO summit. Doesn't matter whether they come from the left wing or the right wing. I mean, if he's right, and there's no reason to doubt that people are telling him that's concerning, that the world leaders would be saying something like that.
Well, they're not saying who they are in public, that's for sure. And I think the American president has a responsibility to lead. And this president has shown that he is a leader, has been a leader, and can and will be a leader. Look, doing these meetings right now, as he's doing, demonstrates exactly what the leader needs to be. So I'm not sure why there would be prognostications of a few years out. We could say that about anybody, quite frankly. Donald Trump is 78, as we were talking about, or you were talking about in your previous segment.
Right.
Who knows how he'll be as well. I think facts and actions are what need to be used to judge, not innuendo and nameless quotes.
I think the question is whether they're observing him in person, as they did, when he was in Normandy, as they're doing this week in Washington, and the conclusions maybe they're drawing from that. Now, Ukraine is obviously one of, if not the biggest issue that many of these world leaders are facing. I thought it was interesting what Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, had to say about our politics. How he basically says everybody around the world is looking forward to November. Let's listen.
Everyone is waiting for November. Americans are waiting for November in Europe, Middle East, in the Pacific. The whole world is looking to autumn, looking to November. And truly speaking, Putin awaits November 2.
Putin awaits November 2. So this is this idea that maybe the world is preparing, if they have to, for another Trump administration, right? I mean, that seems to be what he's alluding to.
Well, I think he probably should have said Putin is licking his chops about what could happen if Donald Trump is back in office, which is that he would be cleaning up Ukraine and taking it back over. And that's the danger that we're all facing right now. And that's the real backdrop, is this choice that the American people have. We have a unique responsibility. We don't just select a president for the United States and what we have in our lives here at home, but also as the leader of the free world. And right now, the United States is leading and helping to protect our allies and Ukraine. And Donald Trump would do the opposite. And I think that's why President Zelensky is putting it in that start of a choice. They have to be prepared for all scenarios, but he certainly does not want to see that scenario take place.
That was new video that we just showed, Joel, while you were speaking of Zelensky meeting with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, which allows me to just, before I let you go, change the subject. There they are on Capitol Hill, and ask you a question about Johnson. I thought it was interesting. This was in the Wall Street Journal, the editorial board, about Mike Johnson earlier today. It's an excerpt of this piece that was entitled "Leader of the Free World." He did not indulge a false choice between meeting problems at home and threats abroad. He's pushing his party in the direction of Ronald Reagan, which is correct for the world and politically popular. And the editorial board's point, I wonder what you think of this, is that, there's obviously two factions in the Republican Party right now. The Trump folks are seen as more isolationists. The traditional Republicans are seen as, working with the world some more, building alliances and the like. And it seemed to be they were suggesting Johnson is not, maybe he's not as much of a Trumper on foreign policy as he is kind of an old school Republican. What would you say about that?
Well, God bless the Speaker of the House. He has the hardest job in Washington outside of the president. When I served in the Obama administration, I worked with the Speaker's office every day on behalf of a Democratic president. We had a Republican Speaker, and the same political dynamics were at play then as they are now, but it's more intense now. I think Johnson is trying to be everything to everybody. Ronald Reagan, though, I have to say, would not have endorsed deporting physically 20 million people, undocumented people in the United States. He had the opposite mindset. So I think what you see with the Journal, what they're doing is taking out of his speech from the other day what they like and ignoring what they didn't like. I think Johnson is still pretty much a blank slate on what he'll do on foreign policy.
All right, good conversation, Joel. Thank you, Joel Rubin, for joining us.